I think I will hand over the next session to Dr. Anjana. I think she can share her slides and small introduction about Dr. Anjana. She is currently working as a consultant in the emergency department in Manipal Hospitals, Jayanagar. She has 12 years of over 12 years of experience in the field of emergency medicine with special interest in neurosurgical and pediatric emergency. Completed MBBS from KLE, Jawaharlal Nehru Medical College, Belgaum in 2010. Certificate of Emergency Medicine Training from Manipal Hospital 2013. MRCM UK 2016 from Luton and Dunstable University. NHS certification of completion of training, Royal College of Emergency Medicine from UK. Fellowship in Critical Care Medicine from Apollo Health and MBA completing MBA in Master in Hospital Administration. She has various certifications in advanced trauma life support, instructor of advanced trauma life support, and cardiac life support, American Heart Association, certified in emergency ultrasound, cardiorespiratory and pediatric airway support, regional nerve block and anesthesia, focus trainer, and a teaching faculty in CMED India. Her areas of interest are currently the emergency medicine, and she maintains the isolation zones and training of healthcare workers, conducted BLS training for various emergency physicians. So without taking much time, I'll hand over the session to Dr. Anjana Ravindranath to take over to the management of aortic dissection. Welcome, Dr. Anjana. Dr. Anjana? I think maybe she's muted. Dr. Anjana, you are muted.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I wasn't able to join before. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for that. Earlier, I wasn't able to join. That's why.
No problem.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
I think you can start the session.
So I can just start. Is it in screen? Is it in
but
screen?
not in the slideshow. You can make it in the slideshow and
Is it
start
in the slideshow now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So good evening, everybody. So many topics have been discussed about cardiac emergency right now. And as an emergency physician, I dread aortic dissection because there is no one presentation that it can come in, and it can be a mystery, and we have very little time to act. So here, just go through a case report. 45-year-old tall built man comes in to the department with absolutely no comorbids, says he has had a chest pain, sharp interscapular pain about 2 days ago. He took some painkillers because the local doctor thought that it was a back pain, and it is a musculoskeletal pain. His ECG was normal. Then again, he had the pain and he came into the department. Again, the ECG was done, it was normal. He didn't have any dyspnea, no bladder bowel habits, abnormal habits, abdomen was soft, there was nothing wrong. The duty doctor decided that vitals are stable, BP is 150/90, attributed it to a mild pain, gave him some paracetamol, pantoprazole. The patient has barely stayed around 15 minutes in department. Within no time, he had extreme pain in the back and neck, had a seizure, collapsed. At that time, he was intubated, resuscitated because he was in profound shock. Immediate bedside ultrasound showed there was no pericardial collection around the heart, but a massive left-sided effusion. Because we were not able to ventilate, an ICD was put, and then that drained massive blood, hemothorax of around 2 liters. There was severe metabolic acidosis. He was being shifted to the OT, but then he died. So the diagnosis here was a ruptured type A dissection with a thoracic aorta. And this dissection had extended all the way up to the common iliac. So this is how dangerous it can be, and can be masked as something so trivial. His risk factor was he had Marfan's. So let's go for objectives here. What is what is AAS and AAD? Basically, I would like to differentiate that. And what's the burden of the disease? What are the risk factors that predispose patients to classify the disease? How does the disease progress? And what are the investigations that can help and management strategies? So acute aortic syndrome is basically a syndrome that covers the entire spectrum of life-threatening illness that can enclose around the thoracic aorta. And it can be the classic aortic dissection, where the intimal layer of the vessel is disrupted, or it can be a intramural hematoma, where there is a small amount of blood clot which is formed within the medial layer and it is extending, or it could be an ulceration, which is a penetrating atherosclerotic ulcer. So these all come under the spectrum of acute aortic syndrome. That's why they all may require similar overlaps of treatment. Aortic dissection, however, is a very severe syndrome where there is rapid dissection of the intimal layer of the vessel, and the blood flows and creates a false lumen. This false lumen goes on extending proximally and distally, and it involves other vessels and other branches of the aorta and causes organ injuries. And at the same time, the false lumen keeps on becoming bigger and the true lumen reduces in size, thereby causing problems like occlusive problems. So acute aortic dissection was never reaching the ED previously. It used to be a high mortality and they used to be the cause of sudden deaths. And there's also an entity of chronic dissection where these elements like these thrombus can stay up to even 2 weeks, and they tend to have better prognosis than the acute. And the incidence is around 2.6 to 7.2 per 100,000. So it is pretty rare, and they present a majority of the data in the Western world rather than the Indian. So here, this is the reason why they can come under various timeline. Earlier, they used to be divided as acute and chronic based on 2 weeks and less than 2 weeks or more than 2 weeks. But there's an element here by the International Registry of Acute Aortic Dissection, which says that it could be hyperacute, which is less than 24 hours, acute 2 to 7 days, subacute 8 to 30 days, and chronic of more than 30 days. Now, you must be thinking, if it is so rapid, how can it be chronic? Well, this kind of thrombus, when it does develop within the false lumen, it can sustain, it can come chronic, and they can have episodes of increase, and it can extend further. So that is why this is important for us to know that dissections can come in various manners. Burden of disease is that the acute aortic aneurysms are more picked up in EDs because we have something called AAA scan and a protocol scans that we do for patients who present. And aortic aneurysm is basically an abnormal bulge of the aorta. These are not associated with as many number of deaths as dissection, because dissections kill 3 times more, and 5 to 30 cases per 1 million per year is what the incidence is, 3 times more common in men than compared to women. And it's not a disease only in the old, but it can also happen amongst the young, especially those who have got risk factors. And without diagnosis, the mortality is very high, almost 50%. Few of them get correctly diagnosed, as less as only 15%, despite having all classical signs also, they may get diagnosed only correctly 15%. So what are the risk factors? So being very tall, that particular patient who came in, we should have looked into features of marfanoids. So very tall adults may have features of marfanoids as very tall arm span disproportionate to the height. Then they might have abnormal eye features, and then the high arched palate, and these may give us clue, because marfanoid patients are more predisposed to develop dissection at younger age. Then patients with Ehlers-Danlos, they have hyper elasticity, collagen defects, and that can include type 4, can include vascular problems. Turner syndrome, again, genetic problem where they can come with this type of a feature more commonly seen in women. So these are the predisposing features. And familial history. Then reduce resistance to the aortic wall. As age advances more than 60, when they become, the vessel wall becomes thinner, and thereby if they are hypertensive, they have a higher chance of developing dissection. Pregnancy is a debatable topic, but some say during accelerated hypertensive phase or preeclamptic phase, they may develop, but it is debatable. Aortic wall stress. So anything which causes increased stress over the aortic wall can split the intima. Like hypertension is the most common risk factor. Apart from that, any cardiovascular procedures done which has left it also previous procedures or previous stents put, structural abnormalities, iatrogenic catheterizations done to the aorta, infections like syphilis, which can cause aortitis, can cause aneurysms, arthritis like Takotsu's or giant cell arthritis. So this picture is shown of a patient with temporal arthritis. So that is giant cell arthritis. Bicuspid aortic valve. Instead of having a traditional tricuspid aortic valve, they have a bicuspid aortic valve. Then if patients have got underlying aneurysms previously diagnosed and who are taking recreational drugs like methamphetamine, crack cocaine, any drugs which can cause sympathetic surge. So these are a few risk factors. Now, what exactly happens is when the blood pressure rises, so these are the layers, the intima layer splits and the blood flows within the media layer and it keeps on splitting it. Another pathology is this vasa vasorum, which is the blood supply to the media, that might get compromised, and that may be the reason why there is ulceration or there is hematoma development. So there are three phases. One is atherosclerotic ulcer developing, disruption of vasa vasorum and hematoma forming, or an intimal tear happening which is extending up, down, or it can rupture, or it can cause expansion and causing occlusion of the true lumen or a branch vessel. And if this is happening near the aortic arch, then it can cause aortic regurgitation. And if it tears into and then the blood flows all around the heart, it can also cause pericardial effusion and tamponade. So the classification is important because based on this only the treatment plan is decided. Type A is where it involves the ascending aorta. It can extend distally. The surgery is most commonly thought after, but however, there are recent advances where endovascular approach is also being done. Type B is where it involves aorta beyond the left subclavian branch, and it is mostly medical management if it is without complications. DeBakey, the entire aorta is affected, and DeBakey 2 and 3, same way, it is confined to the ascending aorta, and here it is confined distal to the subclavian artery. The Stanford is the most commonly used. So majority of the sudden dangerous type aortic dissections that kill, majority of them are 60% of them are this category, type A. There's another classification called the Swenson classification, which is based on the nature of what is there in the dissection. Is it a ulcer? Is it a hematoma? Is it limited? Is it bulged? Based on that. So here is the clinical presentation. Like I told you, this aorta gives out branches. So if there is a dissection that is starting here, it can obscure the blood flow towards the brain. It can obscure blood flow towards our limbs. And same way, when it is going down towards the descending aorta, it can reach all the way up to the common iliac and the branches, obscure blood flow towards the legs. So the most common 60% is type A. It will present as a tearing type of chest pain because the intima is tearing along this line. It will cause a ripping or a tearing and a sudden thunderclap chest pain. So that is 90% of the time. The pain is maximum at the time of onset. Then the pain can subside. The pain can be perceived retrosternal. It can be perceived interscapular. It may or may come along with some radicular symptoms, or it may have associated symptoms of dizziness. Then the pain may settle down. The pain could be migrating in nature, and it could be more confined towards the back. So the high risk signs of pulse deficit. Now, if you can notice that this arm and this arm is receiving branches from different parts of the aorta. So based on that, there can be sometimes difference in the pulse of the right arm and of the left arm. Similarly, blood pressure of the right arm and the left arm. That sign, along with a tearing chest pain, interscapular or retrosternal, is very significant for aortic dissection. Other features that can come along which should increase our suspicion is end organ symptoms. Like if they come along with fits, if they have syncope, they have stroke-like symptoms of inability to speech, paresthesia, paralysis, then also you should suspect aortic dissection. Aortic regurgitation might be a new symptom that may have developed along with this chest pain. On echo, it might get picked up, or you may pick up the murmur, new onset murmur. Cardiac tamponade is, of course, the complication that it may develop pericardial effusion going up to tamponade. Atypical presentations are also common, where they may present as neurological with a background history of chest pain. Afterwards, you will come to know once you've stabilized. So if this aorta has ruptured, they can also present to you in shock. So if there's low blood pressure in the background of tearing chest pain, if there is a varying blood pressure difference or varying by more than 20 mmHg, diastolic heart murmur or muffled heart sounds, all of this should increase our suspicion of aortic dissection. Bedside, what can we do is we do an ECG. Just like any patient undifferentiated chest pain comes into the department, we need to do an ECG. As soon as you do an ECG, it might be normal, but if the dissection is involving the aorta, then the type A, then it can also go up to the right coronary, because you know the coronary vessels come from there, the cusps of the aorta, and then leaflets, and then it can lead to a STEMI presentation on the ECG. Now, this is very dangerous because at this point of time, your treatment option will be to give the patient loading doses, which can be catastrophic if it is a dissection. Pericarditis and electrical alternance patterns may also be seen if there is tamponade. ABG is an important tool we use in the ER, where it can have features of metabolic acidosis. If it's a dissection which is leaking, then you may also get high lactates. So you may not have hypotension and profound shock because a rupture might be preceded with a slow leak, but you might get high lactates and metabolic acidosis early. Leukocytosis might be seen. Creatinine changes might be seen if the renal artery is involved. Troponin may be elevated if the myocardium is involved, but it might be normal also. D-dimer somehow has shown some sort of help here, where D-dimer is very rarely negative in the setting of a dissection, but it is not a rule-out criteria like in PE. In PE, it's very sensitive. If it is negative, it is not a pulmonary embolism. You can't do that in a dissection. Cross-match for blood is very important in aortic dissection who's unstable in our ED, because we need to cross large amounts of blood products. Various biomarkers have been tried, but none of them have been shown to indicate dissection. Echo is the only useful tool in the ED, where point-of-care ultrasound can show you type A dissection happening. Here you can see that at the aortic outlet, there is a dissection flap very clearly seen. Separate, there is a false lumen and a true lumen. Same way, you can see the two lumens. This might be possible, but the better visualization of this is seen in a transesophageal echo. Now, transesophageal echo is not possible when the patient is unstable, because it is not something you can do it in the emergency. You cannot do it. So this is more of a chronic management. Like when a patient is stable and chronically you want to serially manage them, at that point of time, they plan for transesophageal echo, but in the ED, we don't go for that. Chest X-ray is a very important tool. We can use it bedside. Chest X-ray can show sometimes widened mediastinum, where the mediastinum will be wide. It can show sometimes the left pleural effusion or the blunting. It can sometimes cause the apical capping. There may be deviation of the trachea, widened mediastinum, deviation of the trachea, which you can see here. And at some points, there can be a very clear calcium sign seen, whereas basically the aortic knob or, it becomes aortic knuckle becomes very clear and the calcium sign might be seen. But a normal chest X-ray does not rule out aortic dissection. That is very important. All of these might be there with complications or unstable aortic dissection, but a normal chest X-ray does not exclude aortic dissection. The investigation of choice here in ED is aortography or aortogram, because it is readily available. CT is faster, and it can delineate the vessels and its branches, and entire involvement can be clearly seen. See, if you can see this contrast here, you can see clearly the double lumen that has been formed and the dissection. Apart from that, you can also go for advanced helical CTs as well as MRI and MR angio, but MRI takes longer. Patient has to be compatible for MRI, and at the same time, it's not available in every center, but most of the centers nowadays have CT. The primary resuscitation is focused on ABCDE approach. As Dr. Niharika also told you, any approach to a patient in the emergency department or anywhere with chest pain would be, is the person talking well? Is he able to breathe well? And support the airway, support the breathing, circulation, disability, and exposure. Having done that, there are certain key things that you need to look for in management in an aortic dissection. Our basic aim is to reduce the aortic wall shear stress. And this is done by regulating the patient's cardiac output. As you all know, cardiac output is heart rate and the blood pressure. So here the heart rate can be reduced by using labetalol, and labetalol is even helpful for reducing the blood pressure. Our aim is to keep the heart rate less than 60 and the SBP of 100 to 120. So when a patient comes with acute dissection and the CT aortogram proves it, we do not want the blood pressure to be at 150 by 90 because it is still going to keep on tearing the intima. It is going to progress. So we want to bring it down rapidly. Labetalol stat dose followed by infusion is what we start, and then monitor their intraarterial BP closely as we are making arrangement for referral. Pain management would require opioids. Fentanyl or morphine is the preferred choice, 10 mg morphine or fentanyl 25 to 50 micrograms. Fluid and blood products might be required if there is a setting of shock. And at that point of time, you might require massive transfusion protocol. What we do here is we arrange 6 units of blood, 4 units of FFP, 4 units of platelets. Everything is kept ready so that back to back, 1:1:1 ratio, we can keep transfusing products so that the patient has a chance. And if the patient has got underlying deranged coagulopathy, like because they are, deranged liver functions, or they are CLD patients and they have got abnormal INRs, they may need rapid correction of that coagulopathy in the form of octreotide, octoplex, that is prothrombin complex concentrates, which also blood banks will have and pharmacies will have. Cardiothoracic referrals for surgical management and endovascular approach is the way. So who all will require immediate intervention or surgery? All type A dissections, persistent pain and unstable features, that means they have neurological feature, or they have paralysis, or they have decreased urine output because of, deranged flow to the kidney. Any sign of branch occlusion, leak is being proved by the aortogram or by the blood gas and by the ultrasound. Continued extension despite optimal medical management, all of them require immediate intervention by CTVS. And here how they manage is type A is immediate surgery. You can go for options of open surgery by sternotomy or by thoracic endovascular aortic repair. Type B, if they are uncomplicated, they are stable, stabilized, and responding very well to medical therapy, then it is called anti-impulse therapy, whereas we are trying to do negative chronotropy, negative inotropy, and keep a watch on how the dissection is. And then go for surgical or interventions if there are signs of malperfusion or any other complications. Then the cardiothoracic referral decides on how to place the treatment further. So there can be TEVAR done, which is the thoracic endovascular aortic repair, or there can be a dissection, flap fenestration, and stenting done. So this is the basis of which the zones of aorta is decided for any intervention based on this zone. So you have 11 zones, and based on this is how the decision is made as to which zone. So these 3 zones are dangerous. So because these 3 zones are your type A, and when they are involved, they can cause life-threatening illnesses, and that's why most of them go for open repair. This is another way of just showing you how the dissection flap fenestration is done, where the false lumen is being pierced, and then the wire is going in, and then the tear is widened. So this initially the true lumen was completely compressed because the false lumen was so wide. But now because of making this tear, the blood is flowing this way and you're having a little bit of an opening through which they can put in the stent. So another case report of how when things are done right, life can be saved. A 65-year-old man had presented with severe chest pain and back pain, epigastric pain, and numbness to the left arm for 2 hours. He was a known hypertensive. So immediate ECG was done and it was normal. There were no ST changes. His trop was negative. And because his blood pressure was so high, 220 by 110, and his symptoms was extreme severe pain, immediate bedside echo was done, and at the same time further evaluation was done, and there was varying blood pressure as well as varying pulses. And at that point of time, the decision was to do an iotogram. An iotogram showed a dissection which was type B, entire descending aorta up till the internal iliac, but there was also extension mildly towards the left subclavian. And then he underwent a urgent CTVS referral, and then he underwent TEVAR, and he made a successful recovery with no end organ injury. So the aim is basically that it is a symptom which should predispose you into thinking, looking into the risk factors. So if there is chest pain, back pain, abdominal pain, any of these pain which are then migrating or traveling or very, very severe or abrupt in onset, described as tearing, ripping, thunderclap, sharp, then we must have a red flag of aortic dissection. Then we should look into whether they have risk factors. And if they have risk factors, we should start checking whether they have got any pulse deficit, whether they have an ischemic limb, whether they have features of stroke or syncope. Along with this, they have presentation with heart failure, MI, tamponade or regurgitation, presence of hemothorax, any end organ injury like ischemic gut, renal infarct, hemoperitoneum, paraplegia, ischemic leg. Then at that point of time, our aim should be to lower the blood pressure rapidly and get the heart rate below 60 and control the pain, and a rapid reference to cardiothoracic surgeon. The choice of drug is fentanyl and labetalol. Along with that, you may use, if they are refractory to labetalol, you could use nitroprusside or nicardipine, but the preferred is labetalol. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anjana.
Yeah.
A very elaborate talk and very nice talk. You have covered everything right from the presentation to a case-based approach. Right now, what about the risk 4 as a risk zone? What about the bifurcation? I mean, bifurcation as a risk zone.
So in the, you're talking about the zones.
Yeah, I think somebody
Can you
asked.
see?
Yeah, can just somebody has asked, so you can just.
Yeah. These zones, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So what was the question?
What about the bifurcation of the aorta?
Yeah.
The risk zone.
Here it is 9, the common iliac, and
Yeah.
then it is 10.
Yeah, I think for all dissections, the risk zones are divided in a different manner than the aneurysms, I think. Where
Okay.
zone that is 4, here it is like, yeah, I think the basically the numbers, they don't much matter. Okay? It's like, how do we deal? Like, if you have any dissection which is going to in the bifurcation, basically, if you have a the rule of thumb is, if you have any dissection which is from the arch, from starting from the arch before the common carotid artery, then there is no role for a endovascular repair.
Yes, if it is before this zone, you have no endovascular repair.
If you have before the carotid, you do not have any option for endovascular. You have to do a arch.
Open.
So Bentall. Bentall means you have to do the aortic valve replacement if there is anything more than mild aortic regurgitation and root replacement.
Along with aortic root replacement, you have to do the surgery, graft.
So the rule of thumb is, you do not have to do too aggressive in any dissections, because the patient has high mortality, around 30 to 40%.
34.
What you have to do is just do the buttress the entry and exit zone, so that you just make it a common tunnel. Because there is true and false lumen, you just have to join the true and false lumen and make a tunnel. So you don't have to.
This is what this does.
Correct.
To some extent.
So you don't have to open the descending aorta. You don't have to go to the bifurcation. You don't have to. You just have to connect the true and false lumen and do the normal work and come out in a dissection.
Yes.
In a dissection, basically, it's if the endovasculars are better, but if you're not able to do endovascular, you have to do the minimum work. Do as many people.
Endovascular has got better outcome than open.
Yes.
Like I mentioned here, endovascular has got better outcome than open. But if they rupture, then you have to convert to open. And then there is an element where on table you can put them into bypass and you can continue. There is a time, I think it gives you a overlay time. I would have to check how much time it gives you. It's like you maintain the cold temperature of 18 degree and you continue repair. You can, there have been instances of that where they have done
Right. So
in
thank you.
advanced setups where they
Thank
put on bypass, depending on, of course, the extent of rupture.
Thank you for the elaborate talk. I think it was one of the very nice talks. I think will thank you, Dr.
How do I
Anjana, once
stop?
again. If any chat box, if we have any more question, you can, I think, answer there, because we'll move to the next session by I think we can move to the next session.
Yeah.
I think this makes us come to the end of the clinical sessions, and now we have sessions on patient education and all. By the next session will be by Mr. Is he there? I think you can exit the screen, Dr. Anjana.
I stopped sharing, right?
Stop there.
Is it
No,
stop
not
sharing?
that. Yeah,
Um,
stopped. It stopped.
okay, thank you.
So the next session is